The universe isn't testing you, it's mirroring you. Change this one signal, and watch your world fold toward you. Beneath every sentence you speak lives a quieter broadcast, steady, unadorned, exact. It travels ahead of you into rooms, into moments, into the unseen architecture of your day. Some call it mood, some call it energy. Whatever the name, it is the part of you that does not negotiate. It announces your inner truth without a word, and life replies in the same language. Outcomes rarely arrive as verdicts. They arrive as reflections. A generous frequency meets chance, encounters that feel guided. A guarded frequency meets a corridor of almosts. Not because destiny favors one person over another, but because mirrors are faithful. They do not invent images, they return them. The field around you behaves like that, precise, impartial, obedient to the tone you carry beneath your explanations. There is a difference between the story on the surface and the signal underneath. I'm fine spoken over a tremor is still a tremor. I'm ready layered on a clenched heartbeat is still a flinch. The outer line may be polished, but the inner line is the blueprint. Reality reads the blueprint, and when thought, emotion, and meaning hum the same pitch, when there is agreement instead of argument, the world stops glitching and starts arranging. Effort is not the villain. Scattered effort is. People stack goals on doubt, bright visions on buried storms, promises on fatigue, and wonder why momentum feels like sand. Static on static, noise pressed over noise. Coherence is different. It is the quiet click when inner and outer stop contradicting each other. Not louder, truer, not harder, cleaner. Purity here is not perfection. It is alignment. One signal, not seven. Think in images. A tuning fork awakens another without touch. One note calls another into song. The same law moves through your days. What is stable in you becomes magnetic outside you. What is fractured in you reproduces in your schedule, your timing, your thresholds. Patterns that once looked like accidents begin to reveal themselves as echoes, your unseen pitch bouncing back from the walls of experience. There is a kind of honesty that changes the air. Not confession for drama, but clarity without performance. When the private state matches the public claim, reality has no mixed instructions to decode. Doors that were half open stop hesitating. People who align with your note recognize you more easily. Coincidence stops feeling random and starts feeling like law. Subtle, exact, dependable. This is the mirror switch. Signal over volume, essence over display, coherence over compulsion. It does not require spectacle. It does not require the choreography of pretending. It asks one thing only: agreement inside the self. When that agreement is present, even ordinary moments carry a different gravity. Timing improves, friction reduces. Paths that once felt crowded thin out as if a lane has been cleared just wide enough for you to pass. Notice how memory reveals the pattern. Seasons of your life when things just worked were rarely the loudest. They were the most congruent. The head wasn't dragging the heart wasn't pulling the body wasn't resisting the calendar. One clear current moved through all of it. Appointments aligned. Messages arrived when they should. Decisions felt less like leaps and more like steps that were already under your feet. The inverse is just as telling. When the inner broadcast is split, reality replies in fragments, nearlies, almosts, delays that stretch into detours. Nothing malicious, nothing mystical, just an immaculate mirror doing its job. Change the image and the reflection must update. This is why the smallest inner shift can feel larger than 100 outer moves. A degree of alignment inside quietly rethreads a week, then a month, then a life. Effort can be thunderous, coherence is decisive. One tries to overpower reality, the other invites it to agree. The difference hides in the broadcast. A scattered inner choir sings 10 songs at once and calls it ambition. A tuned ensemble holds one note and calls it truth. The field does not score volume. It reads the pattern beneath the noise. Affirmations stacked over tension read like interference. Bright goals laid on top of buried storms create a flicker. On, off, until outcomes arrive in the same strobe. It looks like near misses, almost timing, doors that open just wide enough to be noticed and then close. Not punishment, not preference, simply a mirror returning layered signals that cancel themselves in transit. Coherence isn't perfection, it's agreement, thought, emotion, and meaning stop arguing and settle on a single pitch. That pitch becomes architecture. The day begins to align along lines you never drew on paper. Messages arriving when they should, meetings taking on an ease. You didn't script, routes clearing as if the traffic sensed your direction. Quiet law, not loud luck. Static wears many disguises. It can sound like urgency with no center. It can look like over-explaining what is already clear. It can feel like bargaining with outcomes that were never yours to bargain with. The more static, the more reality scatters. Signals go out in fragments. Returns come back in fragments, and the calendar fills with motion that never quite becomes movement. It does not shout, it adds up. One intention, one feeling, one meaning, carried consistently enough to register as a single wave. The mathematics become simple. One vector instead of 7. In that simplicity, force loses its appeal. The work remains, but it stops dragging its own shadow. Action becomes extension, not compensation. A step taken from alignment has more reach than a sprint taken from confusion. Consider how patterns reveal themselves over time. Seasons of coherence have a texture. Conversations flow without rehearsal. Decisions land without the sting of second. Guessing coincidences cluster like constellations. Seasons of static have a different grain. Plans multiply while outcomes dilute, timelines stretch, explanations lengthen, and the horizon keeps moving even when the feet don't. There is nothing mystical in this, only fidelity. The field repeats the instruction it receives. A mixed broadcast creates mixed returns. A clean broadcast leaves less for reality to misread. The map of your days starts to reflect the math of your state. Where the note is steady, delays shorten. Where the note is split, detours proliferate. The mirror remains innocent. The music remains obedient. Try Harder is a popular anthem for static. It rewards motion, not meaning. Signal quietly edits that anthem into aim truer. Vector over volume, direction over decibels. The difference is small at first, barely a degree, and then decisive because degrees compound. A slight correction at the source becomes a new coastline by the time it reaches the edge of the week. This is why some outcomes arrive looking effortless. The effort is still there, but it is no longer tasked with disguising a fracture. It is free to build instead of buffer. When the inner contract is signed, Mind no longer negotiating against heart. Heart no longer dragging body. The external stops asking for proof. It collaborates. Call the principle whatever you like. Signal purity, inner integrity. Resonance, its signature is recognized. Less friction, fewer explanations. A felt precision replacing the habit of push. And with that precision, what once looked like chance begins to look like choreography. Reality keeping time with a note you finally made. Unmistakable. Reality does not hand out prizes for effort, it responds to resonance. 1,000 moves made from a fractured state still add up to a divided signal, noise layered on noise. One clear tone, carried without argument, does more than a calendar full of compensations. The field is not a judge with a ledger. It is a chamber that returns exactly the note it hears. Consider how sound behaves in a vaulted hall. A whisper on the proper frequency travels farther than a shout thrown off. Key, your life moves by the same acoustics. When the inner pitch is steady, thought, emotion, meaning braided into one line, conditions gather as if they had been waiting for the cue. Calls land at the right minute. Paths that were crowded thin out. The improbable stops, acting shy. This is why trying harder often tastes like running in sand. The river doesn't speed up because you paddle louder. It answers to the angle of the oar. Vector over volume, direction over decibels. Adjust the angle by a single degree at the source, and the shoreline you reach can be an entirely different country by week's end. What looks like luck from a distance is usually resonance up close. Resonance is impartial. A signal of scarcity collects confirmations of lack with ruthless precision. A signal of sufficiency keeps finding provision in places you once overlooked. Not reward. Not punishment. Matching. The mirror returns the image. The room feeds back the tone. Where the broadcast is mixed, outcomes arrive mixed. Half invites, half exits, half answers that require decoding. Beware the theater of positivity. Painted smiles do not fool acoustics. A sentence can sparkle while the nervous system still trembles, and the field will, quote, the tremble. Resonance isn't about dressing a feeling in better clothes. It is about letting the feeling and the meaning stop contradicting each other. When the outer claim stops arguing with the inner climate, reality stops asking for clarification. Think in waves rather than words. A stable wave entrains whatever is near, like a lighthouse that doesn't push ships to safety yet. Pulls their attention without strain. Incoherent waves collide and cancel. Coherent waves travel and build. This is why seasons of alignment carry a recognizable texture, fewer explanations, cleaner timing, doors that don't creak when they open. The choreography turns legible. There is a quiet gravity to certainty, not the brittle kind that refuses to listen, but the lived kind that needs no announcement. It bends circumstances the way mass bends space, subtly, continuously, undeniably. Meetings drift into your orbit. Resources round the corner at the moment they can be received. To the untrained eye, it reads as coincidence. To the coherent, it reads as law. Notice the lineage of outcomes that felt meant to be. Trace them back and you'll find not a heroic burst of effort, but a span of days where your inner music stopped modulating every hour. No bargaining, no internal debate, no emotional U-turns. Just one tone sustained long enough to register. That duration, more than volume, more than spectacle, is what turns potential into pattern. And when the echo returns, it returns in kind. The conversation that felt impossible becomes natural. The opportunity that used to slip becomes solid. The schedule gathers itself around your direction, as if acknowledging a conductor. This isn't magic that violates rules. It is fidelity that reveals them. Waves answer waves. Mirrors answer images. The field answers essence. So the equation refines itself: simple, demanding, generous, resonance over reward, signal over show, coherence over compulsion. Hold one note long enough for the world to hear it, and the world will hum it back. Not louder, truer, not someday. Now, wherever the frequency is already clear. Clarity rarely arrives as something added. It appears when what blurs the view falls away. Fear leaves a fingerprint. Guilt leaves a fog. Old conclusions hang like dust in the beam of a quiet room. Remove the weight, and the glass doesn't become new. It becomes true. The picture was waiting beneath the static the entire time. Not all noise shouts. Some noise smiles. It wears productivity and calls itself momentum, stacking plans on plans until the calendar looks full and the signal sounds thin. The field does not mistake motion for music. It waits for the moment the inner note stops wavering. Then it moves with a speed that makes effort look like a prelude. Simplicity can feel suspicious to a mind addicted to puzzles. Complexity keeps ego busy. It offers a ladder to climb even when the ground is already level. Yet coherence prefers clean lines. It trades theater for trajectory. When the narrative stops arguing with the feeling, the day stops arguing back, and what once felt distant steps into reach without ceremony. Dust comes from many places. Inherited stories that once protected a younger self. Promises made to survive old rooms. Echoes of rooms that no longer exist. None of these are enemies. They're artifacts. They carry the temperature of yesterday into today, and the signal carries yesterday's weather into tomorrow. When the temperature equalizes, the air clears and outcomes stop refracting into distorted shapes. There is a sound to authenticity, quiet, unforced, unmistakable. It does not audition. It does not bargain. It does not decorate itself to be chosen. That sound travels farther because nothing in it cancels itself. The mirror meets it with the same fidelity. Fewer half-opens, fewer almosts, fewer doors that pretend to be doors. The corridor straightens by a degree that reshapes the map. Pain is not disqualifying. Pretended peace is. Waves honor truth. A grief admitted rings cleaner than a grin stretched over thunder. Coherence does not demand constant sunshine. It recognizes seasons and still holds one sky. Under that sky, the rhythm becomes reliable. Slow when depth is needed, swift when space is clear. Each tempo reinforcing the same direction. There's a difference between brightness and glare. Brightness illuminates, glare blinds. Some strategies glitter with angles that dazzle the eye and tire the heart. Clarity softens the angles into a single line of travel. The result is less spectacle, more precision. Fewer spikes of triumph, more continuity of flow. The soundtrack shifts from crescendo to cadence. Patterns testify louder than opinions. In seasons where the lens is clean, timing behaves. Messages arrive when they can be received. Meetings land where they can matter. The right doors look ordinary until they open. Then, they look inevitable. What seemed like coincidence reads like choreography, and the choreography feels like law humming under the floorboards. What remains after the static is gone is not emptiness. It is bandwidth space that used to be spent managing inner arguments becomes available for signal. That surplus becomes gravity. It bends logistics in your favor with a patience that looks like grace. The path doesn't scream, it aligns. The horizon doesn't chase, it approaches. Call the process clearing, call it refinement, call it truth coming into focus. The name is smaller than the effect. When the lens is clear, the same room looks larger. The same hour stretches farther. The same step reaches deeper. And the field, faithful as ever, does what it has always done. Returns the image without distortion, answers the note without delay, arranges the scene to match the clarity it now receives. Beneath every decision sits an older draft, the subconscious blueprint that keeps tracing its lines through new days. It is not loud, not theatrical, yet it steers with quiet authority. Call it memory in motion, call it the undercurrent. Either way, it typesets reality before the headline is written. The blueprint is practical, not personal. It stores imprints that once kept you safe, conclusions drawn in smaller rooms, reflexes learned in tighter seasons, echoes inherited from voices that came before you. None of it is a verdict. All of it is a pattern. And patterns, left unseen, keep publishing the same story with different characters. Picture a page with a watermark you can only see in angled light. On the surface, new words appear, fresh promises, fresh plans. Tilt the page, and the watermark shows the older message shaping the ink. Scarcity reads as caution in the calendar. Doubt reads as delay in the message you never send. The field isn't judging, it's tracing the mark beneath the text. This is why bright language can travel nowhere when the undernote disagrees. A sentence can glow while the blueprint still hums with yesterday's weather. Life answers the hum. Meetings arrive half-formed. Timing stutters, opportunities wave from a distance. Not because you are denied, but because the draft beneath the day is still running the press. The subconscious is not an enemy. It is an archive that needs curation. Inside are shelves of useful maps and boxes of expired instructions, all filed under Protect. Some maps point true north: faith, patience, composure. Some lead back to rooms you outgrew. When the outdated charts sit on top, the compass spins. When the wiser ones surface, direction becomes simple again. Think of sound rather than struggle. Old imprints drone at a frequency that cancels cleaner tones. New coherence doesn't attack the drone, it outlasts it. One stable note, sustained long enough, becomes the dominant wave in the room. What once played as background noise loses volume, and the architecture of your days begins to align with the newer pitch. There is a signature to a revised blueprint. Coincidences cluster instead of scatter. Conversations carry less explanation and more ease. Delays that used to stretch thin collapse into timely arrivals. The outer sequence changes because the inner sequence is no longer out of order. Cause and effect stop tripping over each other. Even memory starts to behave differently. The same past no longer predicts the same future. It becomes context, not command. Lessons remain. What was once a rule turns into reference, and reference is lighter to carry. The blueprint keeps what is true, releases what is spent, and the signal stops contradicting itself. The field remains faithful. It keeps mirroring what it receives with immaculate accuracy. When the underdraft shifts, the mirror updates. The horizon that kept slipping back takes one quiet step forward. Not spectacle, Precision, not noise, design. The print changes because the plate changed. So the work of this chapter is simple in principle, profound in effect. Allow the architect beneath the surface to draw with today's hand, not yesterday's fear. When the hidden lines match the spoken lines, the day stops translating and starts responding. The result is a life that reads cleaner, moves truer, and returns your essence without distortion. One blueprint, one broadcast, one unmistakable note. In the smallest rooms of reality, particles change their behavior when watched. Not because sight pressures them, but because observation is participation. Attention is not a flashlight. It is a tuning fork. Aim it with judgment, and the scene tenses. Aim it with quiet accuracy, and the pattern softens, revealing the line it wanted to take all along. There is a difference between scrutiny and witnessing. Scrutiny hunts for fault and accidentally amplifies it. Noise studying noise until both grow louder. Witnessing meets what is present without disguise. It neither flatters nor condemns. It recognizes the note, and that recognition, simple, steady, begins to retune the room. In this way, perception becomes an instrument, not a verdict. Old imprints rely on speed. They move quickly, borrowing your momentum to repeat themselves. When seeing clearly, they lose propulsion. A reflex that once felt like truth is revealed as timing. Just a well-practiced entrance. The moment it's recognized, the entrance misses its cue. The scene rewrites itself. No wrestling, no theater, just accuracy. And with accuracy, a shift in frequency. Naming is lighter than narrating. A storm described as a storm passes through. A storm dramatized as identity tends to linger. Reality takes its instruction from the quality of the gaze. A harsh lens fractures the subject. A faithful lens lets edges become clean. The field mirrors both with immaculate integrity. Fracture answered with scatter. Fidelity answered with alignment. This is why certain days feel guided without being planned. The observer inside you matured, less explaining or seeing, less performance, more truth. Choices refined themselves because the need to prove dissolved. Reactions gave way to responses, not slower, just clearer. Time behaved differently because attention stopped spending itself on correction and started investing itself in coherence. Observation alters sequence. The moment a pattern is seen as pattern, it stops being fate and returns to being an option. Options carry different weights under different lights. The light of judgment hardens them. The light of clarity thins what is hollow and deepens what is real. Under that light, paths that drain begin to look brittle, and paths that give begin to glow. There is gravity in honest seeing. Not the heavy kind that pins things down, but the kind that draws what is congruent into orbit. People with compatible notes recognize the wavelength. Messages arrive at the minute they can matter. Doors that once asked for passwords decide the match is sufficient and swing. The choreography that felt random reveals its count. The observer shift also quiets the appetite for spectacle. When the gaze is steady, drama loses its market. Peaks and plunges give way to continuity. A cleaner cadence with fewer apologies. The soundtrack changes from proof to presence. In that presence, the blueprint beneath your day's updates, line by line, until the surface reflects the revision with almost embarrassing precision. Even memory obeys the new lens. What once functioned as prophecy becomes context, useful when needed, silent when not. The past stops editing the present in secret. It returns to its proper shelf as reference, while the living page is typeset by today's signal. The field, faithful as ever, mirrors the update without delay, less static, more signal, fewer detours, truer directions. Call this chapter the art of clean attention. No ornament, no argument. Just the kind of seeing that refuses to lie. When the observer no longer performs, the broadcast purifies. When the broadcast purifies, the mirror clarifies. And when the mirror clarifies, life answers in a language you can finally trust. Not louder, truer, not later, now. The turning point is rarely a thunderclap. It is a note that stops wavering. A life that once felt random begins to move with quiet precision. Not because destiny changed, but because the signal did. Mirrors do not invent images, they return them. Rooms do not compose songs. They carry the tone you bring. When the inner broadcast becomes one clear line, scattered hours gather themselves into a path. All along, the pattern was faithful. Noise returned as noise. Clarity returned as clarity. Effort without agreement scattered into detours. Coherence without spectacle arranged itself into timing that felt almost unreal until it became normal. You were never far from it. The distance was measured in contradiction, not miles. The blueprint beneath the day, once drafted by smaller seasons, receives a revision in present ink. Old conclusions retire. Useful wisdom remains. The architecture updates and the outer sequence follows, not as a favor, but as simple fidelity. What used to look like luck begins to read like law, the gentle mathematics of resonance tracked across your calendar. Observation turns from theater into truth. Gaze without disguise becomes gravity. Encounters that matter arrive when they can be received. Doors that once asked for passwords recognize the note and open. The horizon stops drifting back. It holds still and lets your steps meet it. This is the mirror's secret. It has no secret. It shows what it's given. When thought, emotion, and meaning agree, the reflection stops arguing. When the reflection stops arguing, momentum feels clean. The same streets look wider. The same hour stretches farther. The same effort reaches deeper because it is no longer tasked with covering a fracture. So the promise that began this message remains intact and unembellished. The universe isn't testing you. It's mirroring you. Change this one signal, and the world folds toward you by the same law that once returned your static. Not louder, truer. Not later, now. One blueprint, one broadcast, one unmistakable note. If this resonated with you, write one word in the comments. Your chosen frequency for the days ahead. Subscribe for more deep, coherent storytelling that keeps your signal clean. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. Share this with someone who's ready to trade noise for clarity. Save this video and revisit it whenever you want the mirror to answer with precision.